just us, can elevate the consciousness of this entire planet. We can do it. We can live this. And there will be times when we'll be called buffoons. And there will be times when it will seem impossible and that the task is too big. But this morning, on my balcony at the hotel, as I meditated, I was told to say what I just said to you, that this is a representation of exactly what Francesco was attempting to do. To take to the world, which we have done, 800 years later. He didn't have the internet. He didn't have television. He didn't have the ways that we have today. But none of that has changed in terms of who we really are. It's not this physicalness that we are. It's something so much more profound. We can extend so much love here and practice it from the time we go to sleep at night until we awaken, and every moment that we're awake. We can practice it. We can all be it. And make miracles take place. It may be a very emotional afternoon. This beautiful church was built 3 centuries before St. Francis was walking on this planet, which means it's well over 1,000 years old. And just being here in this place at this time, and to share with you how much the little man who walked around the world to teach the same kind of lesson that I'm attempting to teach some 1,000 or so years after his death is, it leaves me breathless. But before I go into my words, and I really haven't prepared a lecture like I usually do, I'm just going to let it come. I meditated for the last half hour or so, and was told to just speak from my heart, which is what I'll be doing. Those words have particular meaning for those of you who know anything about Francesco and his life. Brother, sun, sister, moon. Francesco believed that we were all connected to everything, that every one of us is a brother or a sister to every gift that God gives us. The gift of the land, the gift of the air, the gift of death. He called it Brother Death. And would always refer to our connection to each other. And I think about this group and our time together here in this magical week or 10 days of traveling to 3 of the most divine, spiritually enlightening places to visit on this planet Earth. What a real treasure it is, what a real honor it is for all of us to be able as a group to go to these places. But you may think that you signed up for a program that you heard me speaking about, perhaps at a lecture, perhaps you saw it on the internet, perhaps someone else told you about it or you saw a flyer for it, and you may think that you were the one deciding whether or not you should really do this, whether you could afford it, whether you could clear your calendar and have enough time to fit it all in, whatever. But I have a very much of a different opinion about it. I have a deeper knowing about what we're all here to do. And I want to share that with you. Because one of the things that I have learned is that there is always something bigger moving the pieces around, even when we think that we're the one who are making the choices. Carl Jung once said that at the same moment that you are making choices in your life, you are also the spear carrier or the extra in a much larger drama. And he said, in effect, we are all doomed to make choices. You see the paradox. We're doomed. We're not doing anything, we're all just being done. And yet within that larger context of being done, we're also making choices. But it really boils down to a realization that who we are, who each and every one of us, our essence is not this body that we're in and these physical choices that we're making. I ask my audiences frequently, how many bodies have you been in since you incarnated into this planet on this lifetime? Because one of the great teachers and sages of my life, a man named Muktananda in India, was asked the question, what is real, Swami? What is real? And he said, that is real, which never changes. So anything that is changing doesn't meet the definition of being real. So who are you? What part of you meets that definition? Certainly not that body that you're in. We've all been in so many bodies since we showed up. We were all in a little body about this big that weighed 7 or 8 or 9 pounds. And we were all in a body that was this big, a little toddler, and a teenage body, and a 20-year-old body, and for some, a body that has gone on, we've been in many bodies up and through the 70s and 80s, like myself, 71 years of age. And if you think that body that you are in is real, then you must have thought that about your 10-year-old body as well. So I invite you to go out and bring that 10-year-old body in here, and we'll talk to it. And you smirk and laugh and so on because you realize that that's impossible, because it's not real. It doesn't exist, does it? And the same is true of the body that you walked into this beautiful church here in Assisi tonight. It will be different when you walk out. You'll walk out of here with a different body than you walked in with. So that by that definition, this is all just an illusion. It's just constantly changing, and therefore it isn't real. But there is a part of each and every one of us that can remember being in that 10-year-old body, and that observed it and noticed it. And that you can close your eyes and be there. You can do everything you did when you were 10 or 12 or 20 or 30 or whatever. And so it is to that element of your consciousness, of your awareness, of your reality that I address these remarks. Not the body, not our physical possessions, but our soul, our spirit, our divine mind, whatever we call it. It is to that is the only thing that is real. And when we learn to live from there, from that place, I call it the higher place, the higher self, or the highest self. The part of us that realizes that all of us, the poet T.S. Eliot said that we shall not cease from exploration. But at the end of all of our exploring will be to return to the place from which we originated, but to know it for the first time. The poet spoke of death. I don't. I believe we can return to that place from which we originated. Call it the Tao, call it God, call it soul, and come to know it. And as my awareness of the man who this city brought up and is honored by his presence, he was actually known as God's buffoon, God's fool. Wherever he would go, he would be mocked. And he was really trying to teach all of us to let go of our attachment to our possessions, to our bodies, to who we are. In fact, he believed that the only way you could get closer to God was to remove all of your attachments to your stuff, to what you own, and instead come from a place of pure and divine love. And this gathering here for this miraculous journey that we're all on began as an idea. I think it was my idea, but I know that something bigger is always moving the pieces around. And I'm always aware that even though I think that it's me making the choices, I also know that I'm also the spear carrier or the extra in a much, much larger drama. And that I am being told how to be. And the more I listen to that voice, that calling, that pulls me in a direction away from where I was in the earlier part of my life, when I lived my life on the basis of my own ego and believed that my self-importance and my fame and my abilities to do things had something to do with my being special. And I've come to realize that it's not that way at all. I've often said that true nobility is not really about being better than anyone else. It's about being better than you used to be. And I think being better than you used to be really means less and less attachment and reliance upon your stuff, your body, your accomplishments, your reputation, your accumulations. Less on that, and more on the inner mantras. See, the inner mantra of the ego, which I've had to learn to shed and tame, is what's in it for me? 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 What can I do? How much can I get? I'm in competition with. I want more. More, more, more. Everything I have, I own. It's mine, it's mine, it's mine. That's the mantra of the ego. You all recognize it. But the mantra of the higher self, the God-realized part of ourself, is how may I serve? How may I serve? How may I serve? And there is no greater model of that than the man who lived in this city, walked on these very grounds that we sit here today, Francesco. Francesco, who was a wealthy man. He was a warrior, spent time in prison. He was a troubadour and a man who loved to have a good time and party. And there came a moment, I call these moments, in Japanese there's a word called satorai. It means an instant awakening. In the Bible there's a story of a man who was a killer, a murderer, who crucified Christians. His name was Saul, and he lived in a city not too far from here called Tarsus. And in one of his voyages, one of his journeys on the road to Damascus, he received a sign, a satorai, an instant awakening, and he became Paul, the author of 80% of the New Testament. From Saul to Paul, the instant awakening. My awakening hasn't been so instant. I can go back and think about so many of the things that St. Francis spoke about. Pursuit of pleasure, belief in my being better than others, high ego involvement in my life, attachment to things. And it has been a gradual process for me. And this process has led me to lecture in places like this and ask you to join me on this 10-day tour that is more than a visit to 3 special cities, I promise you. It is a journey of miracles. And it was put together in large part by that little Franciscan, the man for whom we named the city of San Francisco. God's buffoon, God's fool, had a lot to do with this. I spoke to my friend at Hay House, Reed Tracy. We spoke about this tour for a very long time, and it just seemed it would be just impossible to put together, to gather this many people and to make it cost effective, to get airplanes and pilots, to get buses and bus drivers, buses that drive through tiny little narrow streets. It's got to be St. Francis behind the wheel making those things happen. I bless that driver every time. He misses those things by this much. And it just seemed like an impossible undertaking. And yet there was something that just kept pulling us to do it. It wasn't about making money because it was going to cost more to put it together than that was going to come in. As you'll see, as we proceed through this, you'll see what is involved in making it all happen. But you know, at the time of St. Francis, when he wanted to get his message across, he only had himself and a handful of crazy people. They were all just as loony as he was. Dancing, throwing his clothes off and walking naked in the piazza to just illustrate that he was giving up and wedding poverty and chastity. And he was so limited. Think about it. It was the 13th century. It was the Middle Ages. So you saw what it was like. We all met in Rome. You got on that bus, and you saw how long it took to get from Rome to Assisi. He walked it. He walked it in times when there were wild animals living between here and there, when there were robbers in the forests, when there were no highways, when there was no hygiene, when sickness was everywhere and death was all around. Think about what it would be like to just throw away everything that you have. Take your clothes off and put a robe around yourself and beg for food and be ready to be beaten continuously. He wasn't beaten not only by robbers and murderers, but he was beaten by people who were members of the church, who told him, go away from this monastery. We don't want people like you. You're filthy. You smell bad. Get out of here. And he would actually take his beatings. And yet his vision, legend tells us that he heard a voice at San Damiano, and Jesus spoke to him and said, heal my church. And Brother Leo, who was his constant companion, said to him, he must mean the Roman Church. And he said, no, that isn't what he meant by church. He meant the spirit that is missing in humanity, the absence of love in our hearts. Heal that. That's what he called the church. And he said, you mean just here in Assisi? And he said, no. And he said, you mean just in Italy? And he said, no. He said, it is for us to heal the whole world. Now, I want to tell you, folks, I have felt the presence of St. Francis so strongly in my life. I even had a past life regression done about 7 or 8 years ago, at a time that I was in deep despair. My wife and I, who had raised 7 children, had separated. I was in pain. She was in pain. And I went and had this past life regression that is something called the 15 steps. And you go through 15 steps. And it took 4 or 5 hours to do this. And when you reach the bottom step, you're in this chamber. And in this chamber, you are in a hypnotized state. And in this hypnotized state, I was taken back. And there I was with St. Francis. Or maybe as St. Francis, because it just felt so real to me. I mean, I could just feel it. And when the regression was over, I can remember, because there was it's like being in a deep coma. And I came out of it, and I was a different person. I had been suffering for a couple of years because we had been separated. I was on Maui in Hawaii. My children were there with me. My wife was back in Florida. We weren't talking much. She had hired lawyers, paying out outrageous amounts of money by the hour, by the minute. Lawyers who looked at Wayne Dyer and said, this is my new yacht. One of them had said that. I got Wayne Dyer's divorce and this is going to be my yacht. He actually had said that to someone who reported it to me. And I got into my automobile and drove away after that, and I could see it, and I can see it now because it's so, when we walked in here and we saw the priest who lives here, the Franciscan garb, the Franciscan robe, the brown robe, with just the tie around it. I could see them, and I can see it now. It's in my consciousness, and in my meditations, even today, that image is always there. And I haven't really shared this with anyone because it's so private. But it seems like this is a place to do it, because I always see that small feature of a man with the dark hair, with the young in his 30s, And he's always with me in my meditations, always. And whenever that vision appears in my mental picturing, an enormous sense of peace comes over me. And that afternoon, after feeling like I had the heart of St. Francis at that time. I hesitate to be in this place and say I was St. Francis. It just isn't. That's just. I'd be too humbled to say such a thing. But I was there in some way. And I remember getting into my automobile and calling my wife, and we hadn't been talking much. And I said to her, from this moment on, I will not pay any funds to anyone who has their interest above ours. And I'm done with it. And she agreed. And that was 8 or 9 years ago. We still do not live together, but we're still married, and we're still close and friends, and we're still the parents of 7 children, 8 including my first daughter, Tracy. And we made a decision we weren't going to divorce our children, that we both loved them and we're going to pull this off in a spirit of love. And all of the animosity and all of the bitterness and all the disagreements and all of the struggles and all of the pain just seemed to go away. And all we did then was just say nice things about each other to our friends and to whomever. And there's still a strong spirit of love. She is with someone else, I am as well. That's not the issue. It's like that's what Francesco has done for me. He has replaced suffering and pain with a welcoming, a loving towards anyone and anything, without judgment, without criticism, without condemnation. And as I began to put this trip together and talk to the people who coordinated it, many of whom you will be speaking to and have spoken to and got us all here, it began to unfold in a perfect way. And everything just seemed to work out. Being able to have this church is just almost an impossibility, isn't it, Nancy? I mean, it's just, and yet the friars who live here said, you may have it for 2.5 hours on this day, and only on this day, and we don't do this anywhere else. It happened here, it happened in Lourdes, and it happened in Medjugorje. We were just given access to holy places. And I say this to you because I know that there is something bigger happening right here, and that I have the mic, like St. Francis had the mic when he traveled with his ragamuffin band of people who were out there just begging and dancing and suffering and going to the Pope Innocent in Rome, and in their filthy clothes, and asking for a blessing to teach within the church the message of poverty, non-attachment, love for all, being related to the sun and the moon and the birds. And I think about the correlation between what St. Francesco was attempting to do almost 800 years ago, and what we're attempting to do here today. And look, this morning, I got up at, staying in this beautiful hotel and have a balcony out there, and I got up about 20 minutes to 5 and went out onto my balcony and listened to the birds just starting to chirp out there, just with a bathing suit on and no shirt. It was cool out there, but I didn't think a cold thought. I only thought about St. Francis and how he would sleep with practically nothing on in the midst of winter and say it was a blessing to be able to feel the suffering. And I was out there, I was meditating and having just a sort of almost a connection to, I felt so close to God because several miracles have taken place in my life recently, and I'll share some of those with you on this journey. And as a result of those miraculous occurrences that have taken place in my life, I now awaken 4 hours or so earlier than I used to. I used to find it easy to sleep till 8 or 9 o'clock in the last year or so because of this diagnosis I'd had of leukemia, and now I am leukemia free because my life can't be threatened. There's no life-threatening diseases possible for me because this body is not my life. It's just a temporary temple. It's not real because it's changing. That which is eternal just keeps occupying a new one. And while I was out there this morning, asking God, because I now have these, I awaken now at 4 a.m., 3:34, 4. This isn't to write. My writing is complete right now. It's just to have a talk with God. And in this talk with God, I hold a couple of crystals in my hand, and I feel so. I used to wake up at 4 o'clock, and that was just a call to pee, you know? That's what happens when you're 71, you know? They say the only thing they get much more of as you get older is trips to the bathroom. So, but now when I awaken at 4 or 4:30 or whatever time it is, I am so grateful and thankful for being awakened from my slumber, from that I now have this time all alone just to talk to God. And I call it my talking to God time. And it's so peaceful and wonderful and just blissful for me that the thought of going back to sleep is never a part of it. It's just, and this is a very private thing. I'm sharing a very private thing here, probably to millions of people. And this morning, when I was asking, should I prepare to give a lecture? I kept hearing, you don't have to prepare. You don't have to write it out. You don't have to think about what you're going to say. You'll be guided. What you need to say will be there for you. I've said for many years that God delivers all the speeches and writes all the books and builds all the bridges. But now I know, since this body isn't real and none of yours are either, that there's much more truth in that Because I look out into this beautiful church here and I see 162 or so people sitting here. And each body looks a little bit different than the other. But there's only one mind in here. And we're all using it. And that which listens to these words and looks out from behind your eyes is the same mind that we all share. Thank you. It's the mind of God. That God is who we are. It's perfect. When Jesus was about to be stoned, as reported in the New Testament, and he said, "Why? Why would you stone me?" And they said, those who were going to stone him, his enemies, "Because you blaspheme. You claim to be God, and you are but a man." And Jesus said to them, "Is it not written in your laws that I have said, you are gods?" And he left. And St. Paul, writing in Philippians, says to the people in his letters, "Have in you the same mind as Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God." You don't learn those passages real well in the churches, but they're there. "Even the least among you can do all that I have done, and even greater things." You all have it within you, and it's that mind of God that all of us are that I'm addressing here. And now I think about how Francesco had for his ideal to go to the world, and he traveled. He went by boat. He went on the Crusades. He went to places thousands of miles away, acting as God's fool, talking to people, and attempting to get them to see this notion that God is something that is inside each and every one of us, and that we need to find ourselves aligned with that, which means not attached to our stuff and our things and our accomplishments and our beliefs that we're better than anybody else. And I think then about his mission, and I think about the mission of this group, you, every one of you in this room, who got called to be here today. And there are people here in this room from all over the world. And it's not an accident. We aren't all here as representative of one country. There are people here from South America. Where are you? And there are people here from Africa. Where are you? And there are people here from the United States, from Canada. There are people here from Europe. There are people here from Asia. There are people from all over the world, right here, in this room. Imagine that. What an opportunity we have. There are people here in their 80s. Where are you? There are people here in their 70s. Here I am. There are people here in their 60s. There are people here in their 50s. There are people here in their 40s. There are people here in their 30s. There are people here in their 20s. There's even teenagers here. All age groups. There are college-educated people. There are business people. There are teachers. There are philosophers. There are secretaries. There are cab drivers. There are beauticians. There are professors. We represent the world right here. It's so amazing. Do you see it? And we have an obligation while we are here together in these 10 days on this miraculous journey that we're undertaking, to live what Francesco asked us to live in the most minute of ways. No matter what happens in the next 10 days, love it. If something is missing, be grateful that you no longer are attached to it. If something isn't going the way you want it to go, be grateful for the opportunity to suffer a little bit. When you extend greetings to each other, whoever runs the tour or whoever is doing something that you think they shouldn't be doing, love them for it. Show an ability to be in a state of pure love, to live from what they speak about in the I Am discourses, the place within you where there is no condemnation, no judgment, and no criticism towards any of God's children, any place, anywhere. We can, as a group here, 162 of us, we don't just have to get good pictures and see great relics. There's much more that we can do here. We can demonstrate and honor the legacy of the man who brought this little village to world prominence by living it and teaching it and taking it from here and practicing it in our homes and in our businesses and preaching it and sharing it. Just us can elevate the consciousness of this entire planet. We can do it. We can live this. And there will be times when we'll be called buffoons. And there will be times when it will seem impossible and that the task is too big. But this morning, on my balcony at the hotel, as I meditated, I was told to say what I just said to you, that this is a representation of exactly what Francesco was attempting to do. To take to the world, which we have done, 800 years later. He didn't have the internet. He didn't have television. He didn't have the ways that we have today. But none of that has changed in terms of who we really are. It's not this physicalness that we are. It's something so much more profound. We can extend so much love here and practice it from the time we go to sleep at night until we awaken, and every moment that we're awake. We can practice it. We can all be it and make miracles take place. I mean, I'm, I guess, enough of a buffoon and God's fool to believe that we have the ability to do that. And it's why, you know, I just spent some time with my brothers who are 75 and 73, and they've been retired for 10 or 15 years. And I can't even imagine the concept when people ask me, when's that going to happen for you? I mean, how do you retire from a life's mission to teach what St. Francis taught? How do you retire from that? How do you let go of that? You just, in the opening of Franco Zeffirelli's movie, Brother, Sun, Sister Moon, you see Francesco crawling along the ledge of the ceiling of the roof of a building. And you remember this? And he's chasing what? A butterfly. A butterfly is flitting away. And he is just entranced by that. My children sitting here will tell you that just a few weeks ago on Maui, we had found a caterpillar. My sweetheart, where are you? Carrie? Where's Carrie? Are you? Oh, way in the back. Hi. Hiding back there. She's just fascinated with these caterpillars, and she finds them and goes out and goes way out of her way, you know. We live on Maui where gasoline is $5 a gallon, you know, and she'll go through a whole tank of gas trying to find these leaves, particular leaves that these caterpillars eat, and if you don't get them those leaves, again, it puts them in these beautiful jars, and she has 2 little girls, and she watches, and every day she'll say, how is it going now? How is it going now? And the little caterpillar will get in there, and it's just the most amazing thing to watch. I don't know if you've ever observed one of this and watched the life cycle of one of these things, and how they eat and they eat and they eat, sort of like what we do on this trip. You know, the bread and the wonderful, great Italian food and the pasta and everything that's it. Anyway, maybe we're all getting prepared to be butterflies. I don't know. But, and then they eat and they gorge themselves, and they go from these tiny little crawly things to get bigger and fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter. And then they start crawling up the side of the jar, and there's a little screen that we have at the top, and they get up to the screen and they hang there. And then somehow inside of themselves, they weave a chrysalis. Something comes out of their little caterpillar mouths, and some sticky stuff like super glue comes out of their mouth, and they attach themselves to it, and then they start spinning a web. And how does a caterpillar know how to spin a web? I thought spiders did that, you know. And it spins and spins and spins and spins and spins, and then it comes and it hangs there, and then it turns into a J, an upside down J, and then you watch it, and things start to form inside of it, and it gets a little darker inside, and then one morning you're watching, and it bursts, and there's a butterfly, the symbol of transformation. From what the average person calls to a caterpillar is called death, but to an enlightened being, it's called a butterfly. It's a butterfly. And Francesco is so taken in by this butterfly that he's chasing, sister butterfly. That kind of love. And when I was listening this morning to what should I say, and how should I say it, and will the words be there? Will I be able to pull this off? I always remember what it says in the Course in Miracles. And I think about it as my children were introducing me here this afternoon. If you knew who walked beside you. That means if you had no doubt, if you knew who walked beside you on this path that you have chosen, you could never experience fear or doubt again. And that's how I picked up the microphone, knowing that this thing called my body is not who I am, that God delivers all the speeches. And I thank him for delivering this part. Let's take a short break. Oh, wow. Here's the butterfly that we just saw, that I just spoke about. Here. It's on my daughter's phone. Oop. I don't know if the camera can pull up on that. Can you pull up on that? But this is what we watched. My daughter took a picture of it as it emerged, and it was on my finger. I was actually talking to it. It's got a little mouth on it. I swear it was talking to me. I know. But when you don't mind being called God's fool, but it just looked like it was just saying something like, thank you for letting me get out of this place. Did it go up? There it is. Can you imagine that? That is a symbol. Sorry. Thank you, Seiji. That is a symbol, that little butterfly, and if you didn't get it, maybe we can take a picture of it later, of what Francesco believed we could become, and what I have come to know in my own life. And as I look back on the experiences that have brought me here, I think about several miraculous things that have happened. One of them I spoke about in Rome the other night was related to the finding of my father. My father walked out on his family when I was just a baby, and my two brothers were 2 and 4. And he just abandoned his family, never looked back, never made a phone call, never paid any support, just didn't have anything to do with us. He just walked away. And I grew up with an enormous amount of hatred and anger and bitterness towards this man, wondering how could he treat my mother this way and leave his 3 children and just never even make contact. And as I grew up, I spent the first 9 years or so of my life in a series of foster homes and orphanages, and then my mother managed to get her family all back together again. My oldest brother lived with my grandmother. My other brother, David, and I went to all these different homes together. And I was filled with rage. And I look back and I know that there was some very powerful reason for me to go through those. I often say that we all have the parents that we have because they are what we need. And it's almost as if God said to me before I showed up here, what do you want to do in this lifetime? And I said, I'd like to teach self-reliance. And God said, you want to spend a whole lifetime teaching self-reliance? And I said, yes. And God said, then we better get your little ass into an orphanage. You know? And you will learn to rely upon yourself there. That's as good a place as any. And then no one will ever be able to dissuade you that you have within you the ability to overcome virtually anything. And that's been a lesson that I've known, and my children will tell you. It's like, my daughter gave me a plant. My daughter Sage, sitting here in the front, gave me a plant about 3 years ago. It's a plant that grows out of a rock. I just love it. I named it Impossible. And I just have to water it, and it just keeps growing. And it's just, there's no soil there. It's just growing out of a rock. And I look at that thing and think, if that plant can grow out of a rock, I can do anything. I've just always known that you just make things happen. You don't come up with excuses. I've written books about it. Excuses be gone. Look within and make it happen. And ask for divine guidance. And if you've got addictions, or you've been overweight, or you've been poor, or you're troubled in relationships, or whatever it might be, look within. Identify yourself as a piece of God, and know that with God, all things are possible. Now you tell me what that leaves out. What does all things are possible leave out? Nothing. All things mean all things. If you can visualize it and put your attention on it, you can make it happen. And we are in a temple that sits on the grounds that celebrates the life of a man who absolutely knew that and was declared a saint less than 2 years after his death, when it used to take centuries for such things to happen. So I ended up, through a series of just bizarre circumstances, at my father's grave 10 years after his death, when I found out he had died. He's buried down in Biloxi, Mississippi, as an indigent. And I stood there on his grave in 1974, in August 27th. And I went there to curse him. I went there because I was angry at him. I went there to see if I could talk to this person who I just couldn't fathom. How could he have left and walked away, and knowing that he had 3 children at a time when the world was in depression and there was a war going on, but it was more important for him to go drink and womanize and abandon his responsibilities. I couldn't grasp it. As a young boy, I couldn't grasp it. As a young man, I couldn't grasp it. I get it now. One of my more recent books, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, is dedicated to him as my greatest teacher. Because that day, on his gravesite, just before I was to leave, I went back. Something pulled me back and set me down and said, "You haven't completed your journey, what you're here for." And suddenly out of my mouth came the words, "From this moment on, I send you love. From this moment on, I have no more rage in my heart." And I walked away as if a huge burden had been just lifted from my shoulders. And I went up to New York, where I was a professor, and I still had 2.5 or 3 weeks before the fall semester was to begin in 1974. I went down to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, rented a motel room, and wrote a book called Your Erroneous Zones, Tu Zonas Erroneous, Erroneous Zones, in so many languages. It's in 47 languages. Don't even know how many books are in print of that edition, something like 55 to 60 million. It's touched the lives of people all over the world. My entire life changed. I started getting myself back in shape. I stopped eating bad foods. I got rid of addictions that I had been experiencing. Attracted the right people into my life. My writing took off. My life soared because I got the hatred out of my heart. Mark Twain said that forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. And that was an amazing miracle for me. And then I came here to this city in the year 2000 with my wife and 25 other people that we brought to tour here in Lourdes. And it's why I've come back, and I keep coming back here. And if you've seen my film, The Shift, I tell the story in there of what happened when we were at San Damiano, and we were walking up the stairs, the circular staircase, to see if we could go to the room where St. Clare's bedroom, where she had lived, was as it had appeared in the 13th century. And on that trip was a young man named John, who had a muscular dystrophy, and he wore braces on his legs. And as we were going up this circular staircase, we would have to take one leg, and then we'd have to take the other leg like this in order to get up the steps. But as we went around and around and around, and the walls got narrower and narrower, he couldn't lift his leg out, and he couldn't go up, and he couldn't go back. And he said to me, he said, "Dr. Dyer," he said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't go up any further. I can't go down. And in that instant, I did something that changed my life. Because prior to that trip, I had had a diagnosis on this knee, on this right knee, that it had bone on bone, and it was going to have to ultimately be replaced. I wore braces wherever I went, a brace on this knee. I could hardly play tennis on it anymore. And even walking on it would cause great pain. And the orthopedic doctors said that ultimately that will have to be replaced. I didn't have a brace on that day because I didn't think we were going to be doing much walking. And I said, "John, just strap yourself onto my back and I'll take you up the steps." And I strapped him on, a big hulk of a man as big as I am, with braces on his legs, and I started walking up the steps, and I got about 7 or 8 steps, and this right knee started to collapse. And I start this, and I realized I have no strength in this knee at all. And I had a vision of what the newspapers were going to say in the Assisi Daily News the next morning. Spiritual teacher from America collapses, 40 people dead at the bottom of the stairs. I didn't... And at that instant, and I feel St. Francis here now, I saw a vision of him, and he didn't say a word. He just looked at me and took both of his hands and went like this. It was just a flash, and I can see it now. And I uprighted myself, and I started walking up the steps, and I started walking up the steps, and then I started running up the steps, and then I started running faster, and John was on my back, and I was running and running and running and running and running, and I got up to the top, 3 flights up, and my wife was standing there and said, "What is going on? Everybody else is huffing and puffing and out of breath, and you're running, and you got John on your back? How did you do that?" I said, it was a miracle. I don't know what else to say. And I went over to give thanks, and someone snapped a picture. It became the cover picture on a book called The Spiritual Solution to Every Problem. And since that day, that was 11 or 12 years ago, I've never had anything done to this leg whatsoever. Threw away my braces. I now do Bikram yoga 4 or 5 times a week, all of the poses. I walk every day, at least 4 or 5 miles a day. I swim every day, and it's never been a problem. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's another one of those miracles. And what happens what has happened for me, I should say, as I have begun to understand my calling and what I'm here for, what I'm to do, what my life is to be, I have encountered other miracles as well. And it's like, I've said to people often, Carl Jung, the great teacher, it was to be my training to work as a Jungian analyst, he coined a term called synchronicity. which is a term that sort of identifies what happens to you as you start to elevate your consciousness and to live more a God-realized life and to push back the ego things of pleasure-seeking and only thinking of yourself and begin to serve more and reach out more. As you begin to think and act like God thinks, then you start getting the guidance. The right people start to show up. And whereas at one time it would happen and you'd go, well, booga, 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 what's going on? I was having this thought, and then all of a sudden it just showed up. What happens is you start to say, of course, the right people do show up. The right events do take place. The financing does happen. I assure you that there are people here on this trip who had to figure out a way to come up with the financing to do it, and were concerned about it perhaps right up until a week or so before the trip. Are there people like that in here in the room who, yeah, and somehow you're here, you know, and it's like, it works. You know you're supposed to be here and you just sort of turn it over, and it's like, and that kind of thing begins to happen. And then for me, I begin to realize that everything that shows up in my life, the separation from my wife, the pain, the depression, the stress, my kids will tell you how hard that is, you know, to break up a family, you know, where we all love each other so much. It's almost unbearable. You wonder how you'll get through the hour. And yet Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, a dear friend of mine before she passed away, she said, if you shield the mountain from the windstorms, you'll never see the beauty of the carvings. The storms of our life allow us to produce the beauty. The book, The Power of Intention, I wrote in the midst of that horrifying experience. Some of the most beautiful people have come into my life as a result of that. And I've come to a place where I realize that what Francesco was speaking about, the suffering is something to be blessed, not to be afraid of. So a couple of years ago, I get diagnosed with something that I didn't think could happen to me, leukemia. Cancer? I don't do cancer. I help other people overcome it. I don't do that. And there I was with it. Wonderful people have come into my life. One of them is sitting there, Pam McDonald, who has helped me so much with changing my diet around and teaching me how to think differently. Her wonderful book, The Perfect Gene Diet, which I wrote the foreword to. But something even more profound than that happened. A woman who is a medical doctor in California, an eye doctor, her name's Raina Piskova, medical doctor, heard about my diagnosis, and I didn't know her, but she came to Maui and went to a seminar and said that she knew I could be healed, and that my being healed was really important, not for her, but for the world. And she felt a calling to tell me about it. And she invited me to go down to a place in Brazil called Abadiânia, where a man lives there who has entities enter his body and does surgery without anesthetics, has done it for 25 or 30 million people over the past 40 years in Brazil, never charges anybody anything. They've sent Harvard-trained doctors down there to figure out how could this be happening, and their only comment is, it's outside of my worldview. I don't know how to comment on it. I'm watching it. There's no anesthesia, there's no antiseptic, and there's still no disease. And in over 25 million surgeries, there's never been a report of any infection. People go down and are healed. And Dr. Piskova invited me to go down there with her, and I had said that I would go, but at the last minute or so, I decided against it because I had a writing schedule, and I didn't think that I could complete my writing schedule and still take the 2 weeks that it would be required for me to be down there. So she went anyway. And when she got down there, she still felt such an incredible calling that she asked me to have 4 photographs of me taken dressed in white, from the front, from the back, from both sides. Remember Serena? She did them for me. And she sent the photographs down there by email, and Raina went to John of God and asked, could he do the surgery from a distance? And he looked at the photographs and said, no, I cannot do surgery on him. He's not taking the herbs. He needs to be taking the blessed herbs that are blessed by the saints that are down there. And who knows, it may be Francesco. As you enter into the doors at the Casa in Abadiania, there's a sign up there from St. Ignatius of Loyola. It says, to those who believe, no words are necessary. To those who don't believe, no words are possible. And some won't believe. Some will find what I'm about to say difficult to accept because they have been trained to believe something different. She went to a FedEx office, got the herbs that were blessed, FedExed them up to me. It took 3 days to get there. I took the herbs for 2 days, had my daughter Serena sitting here take the photographs again and send them down to her. She took the photographs, the second set of photographs, which looked just like the first ones to me, and looked at them. He said, yes, the surgery will be Thursday morning at 7 a.m. It was the day of my mother's 95th birthday, April the 21st. I was told the surgery would be at 7 a.m. and that when I awoke, I would have the surgery and I would have to go back to bed for 24 hours. The spiritual part of me believed that this was all possible. The ego part of me said, wait a minute here. I just slept for 8 hours. I'm not going to be going back to sleep for 24 hours. And this guy's in Brazil, and I'm in Hawaii. That's 10,000 miles apart. No, you know how the ego works? It's just... So about 7:15 that morning, I decided I would go for a walk. And I was told, Raina told me, you've had surgery. You're not going to be able to walk. You're going to have to sleep for a week. And you're not going to be able to write. And you're not going to be able to swim. And you can't do any of the kinds of things that you used to. You're just going to have to rest and meditate and be with Jesus Christ. That's what you're going to have to do. And I went to try to go for a walk. And I got about 100 yards from where I lived, and I collapsed. And I crawled back. I was so sick. And I got into bed. And I stayed there for a week, getting up occasionally to have some soup that my children took care of. They were there, fortunately, to take care of me and to help me. And they then said a week later, you will have the sutures removed. And that was to be the 28th of April. They said it will happen at 11 o'clock at night. So I went to bed at 11 o'clock, dressed in white, drinking the water, taking the herbs, doing everything that I was instructed to do. And now I was much more of a believer now. And I came out the next morning, and a watch that I had purchased a few weeks before that was guaranteed to never gain or lose a second, a Panerai watch that my daughter convinced me to buy because she wanted to get my other one, which she now is wearing. And during the night, when I came out in the morning, my watch had stopped for 80 minutes. I had lost 80 minutes on my watch. When I came out, my son, Sands, looked at me and said, "What have you been doing in that room? You have scrape marks on your eyes, you have no pupils, and you look as if you've just seen a ghost." I said, "I don't know, but I just think you're so beautiful." Remember? I said, "Come here, give your daddy a hug. You're just the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." He said, "Get away from me. What has happened to you?" I went to my other daughter. I said, "Look at you. You're just radiant." And something happened that night, because a few days later, now I hadn't done yoga in 11 months because I was told with this leukemia that you can't have heat, you can't get overheated. And sure enough, I believed that, and I started to get sick when I would do yoga, and I had to stop. And I stopped for 11 months until one morning, a few days after the suture removal from John of God, I heard a voice. Then the voice said to me, "Don't walk today. Go to yoga. You can do it now." I called Carrie. I said, "Honey, I'm going to yoga." She said, "Are you sure you're going to get sick?" I said, "I'm going to yoga." I went to yoga, and now I'm back doing it 5 times a week, better than I did it before, doing postures that I couldn't even do a year before. The heat doesn't affect me at all. And I could go on and tell you some of the things that have happened to me and how I feel and the energy levels that have taken place in me. But the biggest thing that happened to me, and why I'm talking to you about it here, because I feel St. Francis here with me right now very strongly, saying, I was there. I was infused with a kind of love that in 71 previous years of living I hadn't known. I was in the midst of a lawsuit. Somebody was suing me over a book that I had written and wanted to claim ownership of some stuff that just didn't make any sense to me, but I was filled with kind of rage about how that's the most outrageous kind of lawsuit. But people file lawsuits because they know that you're not going to go to trial and you'll settle and give them some money. It's sort of an occupation these days. And I just started surrounding this person with love. And it's about to be settled. I don't have any enemies. I don't have anyone on this planet that I have nothing but love for. It has been a transcendent experience. But since that time, even more dramatic is that people have been coming to me. And my children will tell you this, that I now live this, that I meet people virtually every day that need me. One morning I heard, as I was getting ready to go to yoga, something inside of me in my moments of talking to God said, don't go to yoga today. Walk. And leave at exactly 7:30 a.m. And don't walk for an hour like you usually do. Walk for 90 minutes. And you will know then what to do. I walked at 7:30 exactly for an hour. And I knew I still had 30 minutes to walk. And I walked this way and that way and zigzagged this way and went around and went until the 90 minutes were up. And 9 o'clock I returned back to my home. And I looked around and I said, well, it must just been not a real voice. And all of a sudden, a couple from El Dorado Hills, California, were born in India. And the woman approached me and she said, "You're Dr. Dyer. I saw you yesterday and I was afraid to approach you, but something told me I had to if I saw you again. And I just happened to be out here right now. Usually I'm not out here at this time." And I'm never out there at that time, at that place, ever. And she started, and I asked her if she had seen the film, The Shift, and she said no, and I invited her and her husband to come up. My kids were still asleep. It was 9 o'clock, and they were just getting into bed, basically, from the night before. And I invited them up into my home, and I gave them a movie. I said, well, this must be what it is. Maybe I was just supposed to do something nice for them. I gave them a book. I gave them a movie. I signed them. They were very happy. And as we walked down the stairs, the woman tears started flowing, and she said, you just don't know what this means to me. But she said, I have a son. And his name is Samir. And he's handicapped. He's handicapped mentally and he's handicapped physically, and it's such a burden. He's 22 years old, and I just don't know if I can go on with it any longer. It's just so painful. And I walked back up and I gave her something to read that I had written about this, and I said, look, you read this, and this afternoon you call me, and we'll talk. And they called about 2 o'clock, and I said, look, I can't see you now because I had something to do with the children. And I said, but come tonight. And she said, you know, Samir is here. She said, could I bring him? And I said, yes, you can. And at exactly 7 o'clock, this man and woman and this young man, 22 years old, stood about this high, braces on both of his legs, no joints in his hands, fingers, feet, obviously physically handicapped, but and had to sort of be balanced there. And I invited them to come in, and Sage was there with her friend Allie, and they sat there and watched what unfolded. And the woman said, the mother said, she said, Samir, you wanted to ask Dr. Dyer something. What is it you wanted to ask him? And he said, in his halting voice, he said, Dr. Dyer, why is it that God allows some people to have to suffer so much? Like my mom and me. You remember, honey? And I said something to him that I didn't even know I knew because it wasn't me speaking. I said, you suffer, Samir, because you identify with your body and you believe that's who you are. But it's not. I said, there are 6 of us here in this room, but there's only one mind. And each of us get to use it in the way that we choose to use it, and our bodies are nothing more than our curriculum to God. And this is the curriculum that you have this time. But you have the mind of God within you. And if you can re-identify yourself with this and become this instead of what you see here, your suffering will be over. And the mother looked at me as if a veil of pain had been lifted from her heart. And she smiled. And Samir stood up, so proud. And I gave him some tapes and things to listen to. And Sage was going to give him everything she owned. She had just got a new pair of headphones that she was so proud of that she had just ordered over the internet that she just wouldn't even let me touch. And she said, would you like to have these? She just was so moved by the love, as was Allie, as was I. And that's only one day. Since the surgery, since the removal of the sutures, since the freedom from the leukemia, and I haven't even had my blood tested, and I'm not interested. I don't need any validation or by any numbers on a medical term. I know how I feel. I know what I'm about. It's all about love. And one other example is I was out walking after this happened, and a mother and a daughter stopped me. And the mother said, I came here from Vancouver hoping that I would run into you. And you happened to be out here. Again, it was a time I normally don't walk in the middle of the day because I don't want the sun all over me. I usually walk either early in the morning or in the evenings when I swim. And she said my daughter, and her daughter was there, this beautiful girl, 20 years old, her name was Nicolette. And she looked beautiful, but her whole face was just all totally distorted. And the left side of her face was entirely paralyzed. And her mother didn't even have to say anything to me. I just reached up and I said, what's this about? And she said, it just happened 2 days ago and it's getting worse. I've been to a doctor and I've got some kind of palsy or something, and my whole left side is not only paralyzed, but it just seems to be getting worse. I can't get words out. My lip, and she would, only one side of her. I said, come with me. Come upstairs. And I brought her to the same place where I brought Samir. And I counseled her for an hour about the book that have just completed called Wishes Fulfilled, but how to put into your imagination what it is and to live from that. And you'll hear me speak more about this throughout this trip. And how to make this your reality and ignore the evidence of your senses. And I counseled with her and worked with her and made her say, I am paralysis free. I am, because I am is two very important words. They mean what? God. I am that I am. That is my name and my name for all future generations. It's out of the Torah, the book of Exodus. I am paralysis free. More about that in Lourdes. And then I had, by coincidence, a friend of mine that I had flown over to spend 5 days with me to give me what is called cranial sacral therapy, which some people, when they do it, you don't get anything, but this woman is a master. She's the best in the world at it, in my estimation. And it's a way of moving the energy between the cranium and the sacrum and making that energy flow. And she's skilled, and she's not only skilled at it, but she's here on this trip. And not only is she here on this trip, but I'm going to bring her up here in just a moment. And what I said to Nicolette and her mother is, I want you to have a session with this woman who was brought to me by Pam McDonald a year or so before that, all by, quote, coincidence. And she had one session with her. Why don't you come up? This is Kate McKinnon. She's a craniosacral therapist. I'm going to go here. And Kate, we just have a few moments, but I'd like you to just tell the people here what you experienced when you worked with her, when you did that 1 hour session with her, and what has happened to her since.
So I met Nicolette, and she seemed very nervous. She'd never heard of cranial sacral therapy before. She'd never knew Wayne Dyer. And she lay down on the table and explained that she'd been under a lot of stress, that she had college exams, university exams coming up, she had accommodation changes to make, she wanted to get into McGill University, so she had a lot going on. And when this paralysis started on the left side of her face, and she felt that she was handling it, but since the stress produced this palsy on one side of her face, I pointed out to her that maybe something more was going on, and she realized. She lay down on the table, and I was drawn to her stomach area. And as I started to feel into that area, I asked Nicolette is there anything that you're noticing here? And she said, I have had a lot of pain here since I took the medication for the Bell's palsy. And as she started to feel into that, I asked, what do you feel, and is there anything that comes to you, anything that you see? And she said, I see a yellow light, and it's oval-shaped. And I said, well, just bring your attention to that yellow oval light and see what happens. And as we worked on that, something kind of just dissolved for her. Her whole body started to soften, her back could rest on the bed. And afterwards, when I asked her about that, she said that the oval light just shattered into like a million pieces. It just disintegrated. And as that disintegrated, she knew then that she could heal, that she was in control of her body, rather than feeling her body was controlling her. There was a sense of power before that. And then we went up and worked on the facial area. And as we worked there, she started to see a very soft blue light, like a sponge-like light, that she brought into that area that was her healing energy. That was the energy she was bringing in to heal this paralysis. And afterwards, she would recall that blue light and use that whenever she felt stress and tension and maybe doubt that she was going to heal from the paralysis. So I think what she left the session feeling a lot more empowered and was able to go straight back to university and within 2 weeks sat her exams and passed. And is in McGill University, she just got accepted, and I got that text just before I left for this trip that she had got into McGill. And her whole life has really taken on a whole different direction. She got this amazing job. Her mother was so surprised that she went straight back to university to sit the exams when still she had severe paralysis. She was having to take her eye at night. She couldn't taste, she couldn't smile. And within 6 weeks, she was paralysis-free, which was a very rapid recovery from such a severe palsy. She was told maybe that it even wouldn't completely clear up because there was that possibility. But she, after saying, wait a minute,
she had been told by the doctors, because we have the doctor's report, I'm writing this as the introduction to my new book, that it would be a minimum of 2 years if it did heal up, and there was a good chance that the severity of this kind of palsy would last for her lifetime, that she would be exposed to it. She was in Vancouver. I talked to her. She said, I'm paralysis free. And she said to me, I have been saying my affirmation over and over again. I am paralysis free. Not I will be, because I will be means I am not. And I am is the key word. I am is the word of God. I am, God says, paralysis free. And you ignore all the other evidence. She flew out to Calgary, where I was giving a lecture to several thousand people. She stood up on that stage and announced to them, I am paralysis free. And she did it in just a matter of weeks, using the techniques that I'm speaking about here and the work of Kate McKinnon. Thanks, Kate. Kate is a craniosacral therapist. If any of you on this trip would like to encounter what her work is, that's how she is paying for this trip. So she, for €100 for a 1 hour session, if you're interested in experiencing that, and I'm telling you, this is the best in the world. Each one of my kids have already signed up. Louise is going to have it done, and she's the person that when she puts her hands even close to you, you begin to feel this thing, so you can contact her. She'll be with us right through Medjugorje. Obviously, there's 160 people here. You're not going to all be able to do it, but if there's any of you particularly who have areas in your heart or in your soul that you feel need to be healed, but she will be working with me every day, so you don't get my sessions. Whoops, St. Francis just said, give them away. What am I saying? So we have a short time left. What has happened for me since these miracles that I've expressed to you with my father and the way that I got to my father in itself, it would take all the time we have to explain how impossible it would be for me to find my father at his grave. the miracle of the healing that took place for me in Assisi in the year 2000. And I've been since drawn back here. This is my third time coming back because it's this place just, and every time I come, and there will be miraculous healings taking place here in this group, especially if we can stay aligned the way I have been speaking about here today, as not just loving people, but as love. Love, being love. And for me, every day, every morning in my talks with God, I am given some kind of another assignment or opportunity to reach into someone's life and to touch it in a profound way. And it just seems to be the shift that has taken place in my life. And what I wanted to do here is share something with you from one of probably my all-time favorite book. I'm in the process of reading it for the third time. It was written by Nikos Kazantzakis, the Greek writer who wrote The Last Temptation of Christ and Zorba the Greek, and St. Francis. He wrote a fictional account based upon everything that is known about Francesco. And it's one of those books, even as he wrote it in the foreword to the book, I loved this because I know what this is like, because after I came back and had the experience with John of God, I had to put my writing away for that 2-week period because I just couldn't even walk or swim or do anything, let alone sit down and write. But when I went back to the writing after that in May, my handwriting was different. It was as if someone else was writing. My editor, because I write everything by hand, I don't use a computer or a typewriter. I just write it out by hand. And she called me and she said, "Who wrote this out for you?" I said, what do you mean? She said, "Well, the handwriting is different. The slant on the letters is different. There's no crossing out of anything, because I'll be writing and then I'll cross something out and I'll write it on the side." It was just 11, 12, 13 pages as I wrote the John of God experience that I've told you about here, unfolded with new handwriting in a new way and a clarity. She said, "I can't even edit this." I said, "No, you won't be needing to edit it, because it wasn't being written by me. It was and here's what here's the prologue by Nikos Kazantzakis. He says, if I have omitted many of Francis's sayings and deeds, and if I have altered others and added still others which did not take place but which might have taken place, I have done so not out of ignorance or impudence or irreverence, but from a need to match the saint's life with his myth, bringing that life as fully into accord with his essence as possible. Art has this right, and not only the right, but the duty to subject everything to the essence. It feeds upon the story, then assimilates it slowly, cunningly, and turns it into a legend. While writing this legend, which is truer than truth itself, I was overwhelmed by love, reverence, and admiration for Francis, the hero and great martyr. Often large teardrops smeared the manuscript. Often a hand hovered before me in the air, a hand with an eternally renewed wound. Someone seemed to have driven a nail through it. It seemed to be driving a nail through it for all eternity. Everywhere about me, as I wrote, I sensed the saint's invisible presence, because for me, St. Francis is the model of the dutiful man, the man who by means of ceaseless, supremely cruel struggle succeeds in fulfilling our highest obligation, something higher even than morality or truth or beauty, the obligation to transubstantiate the matter which God entrusted to us and turn it into spirit. And I'd like to read you one little story. Francesco was terrified of lepers. In the 13th century, lepers had to wear bells so that they would be identified, so you wouldn't get close to them and contact the contagion of the leprosy. And he was terrified of them. It was his biggest fear. And everything that Francesco feared, he felt he had to experience. And this is a story that is told out of legend but also out of fact of Francesco. The story, this whole book is told through the eyes of Brother Leo. You'll see Brother Leo's grave here probably this evening. Brother Leo was the first person to accompany him, and was always the person who wanted to eat when he wanted to fast. Always the person who wanted to drink wine when he wanted to give whatever they had away. And he tells the story of what it was like to live with a saint, but be a man, but try to becoming one himself. "Wake up, Brother Leo," Francis called, prodding me with his toe. "Wake up, the day has begun." "It's still dark out, Brother Francis," I answered sleepily. "What's your hurry?" "I'm not in a hurry, Brother Leo. It's him, it's God. Wake up." I rose. "Did you have a dream?" "No, I couldn't sleep the whole night. When dawn came, I closed my eyes and prayed to God. 'Father,' I said, 'let me go to sleep. I'm a worker in thy service. I did what thou ordered me to do. I repaired San Damiano. I danced and became a laughing stock in Assisi. I abandoned my mother and my father. Why dost thou not let me sleep? What more dost thou want from me? Wasn't that enough?' And then I heard a savage voice above me. No, not above me, inside me. It was not enough. I swear to you, I wasn't sleeping, Brother Leo. It wasn't a dream. Perhaps everything else is a dream. You and I and this cave and the rain. That voice, however, that voice was not a dream. Not enough, I shouted in terror. What more, then, dost thou want from me? It is day now. Get up and start on your way. I shall stop the rain just for your sake. Start on your way, and soon you shall hear some bells. It will be a leper sent to you by me. Run to him. Embrace him. Kiss him. Do you hear? You act as though you didn't hear me. Why don't you answer?" I couldn't restrain myself any longer. "Thou art not a father," I cried. "Thou dost not love mankind. Thou art merciless and all-powerful, and thou playest with us. Just now thou heardest me tell my companion while we were on the road that I could not bear to touch a leper, and immediately thou wishest to throw me into leprosy's embrace? Does this mean there is no other road, no easier, more convenient road for poor, wretched men to take in order to come and find thee?" Someone inside me laughed, tearing my entrails in two. "There is none," said the voice after a moment, and then it was abruptly silent. Francis was standing unsteadily near the mouth of the cave, gazing out fearfully through the opening. His words had sent shudders through my body. "And now?" I asked, looking at him with deep sympathy. He did not hear. "And now?" I repeated. This time he turned. "Stop talking about now," he said, frowning. "There's no such thing as now. Get up, that we can go find him." "Who?" Francis lowered his voice. I sensed that his entire tormented body was trembling. "The leper," he answered softly. We emerged from the cave. It was growing bright outside. The rain had stopped. In the sky, the clouds rolled along and fled as though pursued by the breath of God. On every leaf there hung a glistening drop of water, and displayed within the drop was the entire rainbow. Setting out, we headed down toward the plain, which was still asleep. Blanketed by the morning mists, Francis went in front, walking with giant strides. He was in a hurry. The sun rose above the mountains. The earth grew warm, and so did we. Far below, and back of the pine trees, we spied a large city. "What city is that, Brother Leo?" Francis asked. "I'm all confused, Brother Francis. I feel like I'm seeing everything for the first time. It's Ravenna, I think." Suddenly, Francis stopped and grasped my arm. He was deathly pale. "Do you hear?" he asked in a low voice. "No." "What?" "Bells." And he said this, "I actually did hear the sound of bells coming from the plain, still far in the distance." We both stood still. Francis's lower jaw was quivering. The bells came continually closer. "He's coming," stammered Francis, leaning upon me for support. His whole body was quaking now. "Let's get away, let's escape," I cried, and I clasped Francis around the waist in order to carry him to safety. Where can we go? Escape? Escape from God? But how, my poor unhappy brother Leo, how? We can take another road, Brother Francis. There will be a leper on every road we take. You'll see the streets will become filled with them. They will not disappear until we have fallen into their arms. So, Brother Leo, put on a bold front. We're going forward. The bells could be heard near us now, just behind the trees. Courage, Francis, my brother, I said. God will give you the strength to endure it. But Francis had already darted forward. The leper had emerged from the clump of trees. In his hand he held a staff covered with bells, which, as he shook the staff, warned passers-by to flee. As soon as he saw Francis running toward him with outspread arms, he uttered a shrill cry, apparently from fright, and halted, his knees giving way beneath him, as though sudden exhaustion prevented him from continuing. I came close and gazed at him with horror. Half of his putrescent nose had fallen away. His hands were without fingers, just stumps, and his lips were an oozing wound. Throwing himself upon the leper, Francis embraced him, then lowered his head and kissed him upon the lips. Afterward, he lifted him in his arms and, covering him with his robe, began to advance slowly with heavy steps toward the city. Surely there would be some nearby lazaretto where we could deposit him. He walked and walked. I followed behind, my eyes filled with tears. God is severe. I reflected, exceedingly severe. He has no pity for mankind. What was it that Francis had just finished telling me? That God's will was supposed to be our own deepest unknown will? No. God asks us what we don't want and then says, that's what I want. He asks us what we hate and then says, that's what I love. Do what displeases you, because that is what pleases me. And you see, here was poor Francis carrying the leper in his arms, having first kissed him on the mouth. The sun had risen nearly to the center of the sky when we felt the large, scattered drops of an autumn sun shower. The city, which had grown larger now, suddenly loomed before us in the sunlight, its towers, churches, and houses glistening. We were drawing near. Suddenly I saw Francis stop abruptly. He bent down and drew aside the robe in order to uncover the leper. But all at once he uttered a loud cry. The robe was empty. Francis turned and looked at me, opening and closing his lips in a vain effort to speak, but his face was resplendent, ablaze. His mustache, whiskers, nose, mouth, everything had vanished in the conflagration. The tears flowing from his eyes, he fell prostrate on the ground and began to kiss the soil. I remained standing above him, trembling. It wasn't a leper. It was Christ himself, who had come down to earth in the form of a leper in order to test Francis. A villager came along, seeing Francis sprawled out on the ground in the rain, weeping. He stopped. What happened to him, he asked. Why is he crying? Did brigands attack and give him a beating? Is that it? No, I answered. A moment ago, Christ came by here. He saw him, and he is weeping from joy. The villager shrugged his shoulders, laughed, and continued hastily past us. Francis opened his eyes. He gazed at the cloudy sky, at the scattered sheets of rainfall that were bedimming the air. Looking down again, he saw me. He was still unable to speak. He smiled at me, and I fell immediately to the ground in the middle of the road next to him and began to kiss him and to stroke his face tenderly, trying to salve the effects of the divine thunderbolt which had fallen upon him. His body was still steaming. I cannot say how long, how many hours we remained there, stretched out in the middle of the road, not speaking a word. But when we got up and looked around us, the sun was setting. The power of speech had returned to Francis. Did you see, Brother Leo? Did you understand? I saw, Brother Francis, but the only thing I understood was that God is playing games with us. This, Brother Leo, is what I understood. All lepers, cripples, sinners, if you kiss them on the mouth. He stopped, afraid to complete his thought. Enlighten me, please, Brother Francis, enlighten me. Do not leave me in the dark. Finally, after a long silence, he murmured with a shudder, all these, if you kiss them on the mouth. Oh God, forgive me for saying this. they all become Christ. Bless you. Can you feel him? Can you feel it? Can you feel it? He's here. Words escape me. I have nothing to say. Make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me bring love. That's the words of St. Francis. That's all.